Welcome everybody and welcome to this wonderful panel. Before we start, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Kate Marsh. I am a self-identifying crip artist and researcher. I work in a number of different roles, but mainly around research and working with other crip artists in producing and realising their own artistic inquiry. I'm really happy to be with these three wonderful artists that I've had the pleasure of spending the beginning of this week with, and we will be discussing around the topic of disrupting the museum. And I'm really pleased that all three of them will speak specifically about their own practice. But before we carry on, I'll briefly describe myself and then hand over to these three to introduce themselves. I am a white, middle-aged woman. I have long brown hair with a fringe. I'm wearing a gold bracelet on my right arm, and my left arm is shorter than my right, and I have one hand. I would like to invite our guests here today to introduce themselves, including a couple of words about their practice, what they do. We'll talk about their practice in more detail in a moment. Chisato, are you happy to start?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Hello, my name is Chisato. That's how I spell it. It's a long name. My sign name is this, Chisato. So I point at and touch the tip of my nose twice with my index finger. I am a female artist. I'm a performing artist. I'm also a BSL art presenter and tour guide. I am an East Asian woman. I've got short dark hair. And that's me.
Hello everyone. I'm Dalibor. I'm tall white male, and I'm happy to be here with these wonderful artists and also with the audience.
Thanks, Dalibor.
Hello everyone. I'm Chiara. I come from Italy. I'm a choreographer, performer, and activist with disability, and a curator too. And I'm very small. I move in the world with a wheelchair. I have not long hair, brown. I'm white. I'm a cis woman.
Thank you, all of you. To be predictable, I'm going to go in the same order, and I would like to invite and ask the three of you, because we're here specifically in this building, in this beautiful room, to talk about your practice in relation to taking place in museum and gallery spaces. So just to create a picture for me and for the audience, it would be really great if you could just briefly describe how your practice happens in museum spaces, and you can give specific examples or speak generally about your work. And Chisato, if it's okay, I'll go to you
There
first.
are a lot of museums and galleries in the whole of Britain. So there's an organisation called Art and Legacy. And we thought, why not encourage people to start going to the smaller museums and galleries around the country? So they started in the north and moved down to the south. This year, we're focusing in the southwest. And I'm involved in this part. So I've been creating with a gallery called Ure Museum. And it's amazing. It's an amazing space. They have incredibly old Egyptian and ancient Greek, Mesopotamian collections there. And it's really, really a tiny museum. And some of the items back from the Mesopotamian times, they were telling me that, well, in those times they didn't have candles. They didn't have candlelight. So when the sun went down, it was just very, very dark. So what did people do for entertainment? Well, they used to lie down and look at the stars. And they had stars and constellations above them. And from this, they'd create stories of myths and the gods based on the constellations. And as they were telling me this, I was thinking back to these times, and there was an Egyptian god called Bennu, which is like a phoenix. And from ancient Greek times, do you know Medusa? Maybe you know, it's a famous mythical creature, a gorgon. And I heard the story of how Medusa became a gorgon. And these stories were really strong and they impacted me and it inspired me to create my performance. So I created a visual vernacular performance, which is called VV for short. And VV is actually a performance art specifically that's been created by the deaf community. And there's lots of different visual elements that go into it, mime, poetry, sign language. And I filmed myself doing this performance. And what I did is project this film performance on the ceiling. So the audience would come into this space and lie on the floor, and it would be kind of like harking back to the old days when people would make stories out of what they could see as the stars in the sky. So they would be on the floor with a cushion to relax their head on and looking up and watching this story. And we had music as a sound ambience. And what I did is included wuja belts, which are vibrating belts that go around your waist and vibrate, linking to music that's made or relating to the sounds that are going on. And so for the taste sense, you know, we had wine, because back in those days, they did have wine. So we were kind of replicating these storytelling moments and bringing all the senses in. So the audience would lie down, experience all of this and watch my performance art. So that's a piece I created from a deaf perspective in that space. And it's kind of bringing those cultures together. And that's what I made for that space. So it's continuing, actually. It's still on, if you're interested. It's in Reading. And it's the Ure Museum, U-R-E Museum. And yeah, that's the way of me creating my art there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience.
Thanks. Dalibor, can you speak a little bit about how your work takes place in museum spaces, and feel free to give examples about specific work or speak generally?
Yes. First, I would say that I'm from Per Art organization. We are in so-called partnership with so-called the Gallery of Matica Srpska. We try to think what kind of stories can we tell about these exhibitions, and we were working on that, and also that translates to one scene where we walk dressed as ghosts with white sheet and everything, and paintings are also covered with white sheets, and we as ghosts speak stories about sculptures or objects or paintings, like we are that sculptures, paintings or objects, and that kind of relates to something another that is very important. That kind of relates because these paintings, objects, and sculptures are hidden from the view. Also, it relates to us disabled persons because we are hidden from the society we live in.
Thanks, Dalibor. Thank you very much. Chiara, tell us a little bit about how your practice. I keep reminding the question just to keep it present. How your practice happens in gallery and museum spaces.
I work both in galleries and museums and in theatres, and I think this is an important consideration, because an object placed in a space like a gallery is different. The meaning can change if you place it then in a theatre. I want to say that I started working in theatres and then moved on to work with galleries and museums. The basis of my performance is I asked myself, I wonder about the distance between different people. between people, and how we can subvert this distance and how we can work with that. And when I was a girl, and then as I grew up as a woman, I always was perceived as someone who was untouchable, but also because the genetic disorder I have renders me rather fragile. I have a bone fragility. And so I was talking with Kisato earlier this afternoon, and we were talking about the fact that this distance can become central to the work and can become a method to work with. When I work inside the gallery, there is an opportunity to really disrupt and revolution this distance. Because the distance, the physical distance within a gallery is effectively different. And not only the spatial distance, but also we need to talk about the light distance, the distance created by sound that the theatre imposes. And also I'd like to speak about the vicinity and the distance with the audience themselves. And when a performer makes a performance or performs, often that includes the people who are present, and that's something that I will discuss further on. So the performance itself includes the audience. Another reason for which I work in museum and galleries is that the space I work in and the space I place myself in relationship with is a space that often hosts works made by other human beings. And so in the performance, there is always this relationship between myself and the public being there, and also the other works which are made by other humans. And so we go back to the idea of the human body as an artwork. And I think this is very exciting for me.
Really interesting, thank you. So what's really interesting me about something that all three of you are saying is, and you, Chiara, you've kind of answered my question before I got to it, which is great. No, it's good. It's good. Thank you. And the question of why gallery spaces, and thank you for articulating that your work crosses gallery spaces and more traditional spaces. And I guess what's really interesting is that whether it's because of the opportunity that working in museums gives you to think about the body as an artwork, or your connection with audiences in a different way, or Dalibor, for you, whether it's how the objects in the museum feed into how you make work, or Chisato, I'm hearing from you about being inspired thematically by what you're seeing. And so I feel like you've all spoken a little bit about what working in galleries and museums give for you. And I think if you could speak, and I'll go to this side to give Chiara a break, that if you could speak maybe a little bit more about why it's important for you that your work is there. So, I mean, Dalibor, maybe if we start with you, because I'm so interested that Per Art have had a long relationship with one museum. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I wonder why it feels important for you as a maker, as an author of the work, and as a performer, that your work happens in those spaces.
Well, for me, it is important that, for example, that my performance, I mean, that I'm co-author of, called We Are Not Monsters, happens in gallery spaces, because this performance is kind of adapted to gallery spaces, because my idea was to represent disabled persons, us disabled persons, as a monsters, but without being one, and that kind of relates to the photos I'm not a photo, sorry. The pictures in the gallery.
Would I be right in thinking from what you're describing that by being in the gallery, there almost becomes a conversation between the theatrical work and the artwork, that actually having the performance in the space is bringing a new dimension to the physical work, but the physical work in the gallery is bringing a dimension into the performance work. That seems to be, that's what I'm hearing from your description.
Yes, and also it brings a new experience for the audience.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Dalibor. So, Chisato, I know, just because I know you and I know your practice, that you have a background of working in traditional spaces and in museums and gallery spaces. So, and you've talked a little bit about, particularly about the space in Reading, but why does it feel important to you that your work happens in museum spaces, and maybe why that's different from more theatrical spaces?
That's a good question. So, before, when we were having a conversation, there was an important word for me that came up. So, obviously, theatres and museums, what do they have in common? It's art. But that word of art, to me, that you need a dialogue. It's you are having an experience with the art, you're having a dialogue with the art. So you're either watching a performance on stage or you're looking at something in a museum. So I sort of thought to myself, you know, it's the same as having a conversation with a person. There's a back and forth going on there. It requires two sides. Me being a deaf person, it's not a physical disability, it's a sensory disability. And so, obviously, humans have 5 senses, but actually, you know, we have 5 senses. And so I'm really, really fascinated in the senses because, again, that's linked to that dialogue that you have because you use all of them when you're having these internal dialogues with art. If you go to the theatre, there's, you know, ambience. There's an ambience in the room, and it's something you can feel, it's tangible, you can touch things, you can smell them. And if you go into a gallery or museum, of course, you know, we have an ambience here. For example, at the National Gallery, I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? You sort of, if you look around, it sort of makes you stand up straight. There's an atmosphere which is really beguiling in this space. So for me, in the Ure Museum, they had that sort of traditional atmosphere there. And so I thought, well, how interesting to have that feeling of like an empty theatre in a museum. And I thought, well, let's bring my work into that. And it's the same in a theatre. If I'm creating my performance, I feel like it's the same atmosphere. So if I'm looking at the paintings or the collections, or, you know, they have really valuable and amazing personal, private stories behind the things there. But it's amazing how much people will just look at things in a gallery and not know the stories behind them. So I'm also a BSL art tour guide and presenter myself. So when I'm preparing for my tours, I do a lot of research into the unknown behind the works of art that I'm showing. And I love to share that with the audience that come to see my presentations. So I try and keep that sort of method, and I've kept that with me. So in the Ure Museum, it felt like a different kind of dialogue. Like and then I thought, okay, well, how would we use all these senses here? And I just find that really interesting, the use of both spaces, yeah.
So for the next provocation, just coming back into your practice and museum spaces. So as this is a panel on disrupting the museum, my next question is how does your practice, how do your bodies, how do your lived experiences, your presence in these spaces, how are they disrupting, if they are? Chiara. Yeah, you.
Obviously, when you take a performance or a piece of performance in a museum, you find that the museum is already full of information. So you have to ask some questions as in where do you place the work, what is around you, and what connections or disconnections you can create with the things that are around. Once you have identified where the work is going to take place, there are different kind of subversions or interruptions that you can bring. For example, at some point I did some work in the Warsaw National Museum, and I found myself with Julia there to look at the room. And we were in a room where there were lots of ancient sculptures from the Roman Empire. And we found ourselves in relation with perfect male busts, idealized beauty. And we thought it would be very interesting to put my body within this space. There were connections because we both came from the same provenance, the same geographical area, being Italy, of course. And both bodies were beautiful, even though with different characteristics. So these busts were very beautiful bodies. I have a beautiful body. But the differences were that these busts were broken. They were broken bodies. I have a whole body. These busts had no life, whereas my body was alive. And so there was a tension and a juxtaposition created between my body and these bodies in the place, in the room.
Thank you. Really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Chisato, how do you disrupt the galleries or museum spaces?
Disruption. Well, Hessian, that project, that was in a small museum. It was a very small, sweet museum. And I was thinking about how we're using that space. My project had a set. It was quite low, the ceiling, and it was a question of how am I going to set up everything. So the projector, obviously, we had to use. We had a technological team to help me out, so we had lots of discussions about that, and we spoke with the staff at the museum, and we asked if, what was going to be possible. And I feel like that was a disruption in itself. And there's another project as well. It's called Deaf for 4 minutes, 32 seconds. Which means, 4 minutes and 33 seconds. There's an American music composer, a piece of composition called 4 minutes, 33 seconds. I don't know if you know about this. But there's a man who comes and sits at the piano, and then the clock starts, and then he sets the clock, and it goes, and he doesn't play anything, and it's silence. And the audience just sit there, and, they're reacting however they're reacting, but the sound of the room becomes the music for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Then he closes the piano lid and walks off. So it's my deaf perspective on that. So when I was creating this, I was sort of having discussions about where is going to be the first place we're going to have it. The first Sight Gallery, thank you. First Sight Gallery was the place where we decided to have that, and that was in Colchester. And I was talking with them about it, and they have a very old piano there. So we agreed I was able to use that. And my aim is to explore the sounds of the piano. And how would I explore that? well, I'm going to open it up. And that is very much a disruption. So I brought tools with me. I bought clamps and all sorts of tools. I would sort of hit it and feel the vibrations. And I'd feel those vibrations, and those were the sounds of the piano that I was using for the piece. And I was really interested in that. And it was a bit risky, obviously. The piano is made of wood, and parts of it would fly off sometimes, so it was a bit risky. I mean, it's performance, guys, so, you know, I mean, that's very disruptive. So, luckily, First Sight Gallery were very welcoming, and they absolutely were like, you do your thing. So I'm really grateful that they said that, actually, yeah. But so when the performance is happening, it's 1 hour and 5 minutes. So it would happen at like 33 minutes past the hour. And so it becomes sort of more and more distorted over time. And it was more and more of a disruption. So by the end, it was just, I mean, you know, you can imagine. And First Sight were very happy. They were like, that's really beautiful piece of art. And they took pieces of the piano to keep in their archive, pieces that had been broken off and disrupted to keep in their archive.
That's really interesting.
So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Dalibor, same question. How do you and how does your work disrupt gallery spaces?
Well, my work and I, or should I say we as a group, Per Art, we disrupt gallery spaces. For example, when we are doing, we are not monsters. We disrupt gallery space that we change their schedule. And we do something really different. That is not. For example, some projection of some paintings, some how you say in English, just some showing of just some paintings from 1 hour to one hour to or something like that, or just so something other. Yes, we disrupt in a way because this that we do is really unusual.
So what fascinates me about how you are all disrupting in different ways is that you seem to be disrupting the codified, the implicit codified rules of museum and gallery spaces. I even observed when I arrived to come to this space, almost immediately the way I was moving through the space changed. I adopted this kind of gallery walk where I'm walking more slowly and something happens in my body and everybody's following the rules of how we access. And I think, Chiara, by your focus on how proximate you are to audiences, that there's something disrupting around that Cesato, you're breaking pianos and lying on pillows and and also noise, making noise in gallery spaces. And I guess I would be, I suppose, because I'm biased, I'm quite seduced by, in general, how deaf and disabled artists disrupt these spaces sometimes by our access needs, that we might access work through touch, or we might make noises when we're not supposed to, and I think there's something really exciting about how the work of deaf and disabled artists intersect with these gallery spaces. This has been such an interesting conversation for me, and I'm sure for everybody else here. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, your experiences so openly and so generously. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.